It's really horrible. I mean, it's ultimately a strange thought to think that, and I'm not privy to like what colonial rule was like in Hong Kong when it was there and them giving it back. I don't know the details, so I could be off base, but it seems that a lot of the things that were implemented by the British in terms of Hong Kong were things that ended up being beneficial in the long run because they became more focused on like enterprise and freedom and individuality, whereas the encroaching Hong Kong and Chinese communism thing was something that the people of Hong Kong push against. But those ideas are British, you know. So, you know.
Well, one of the tools that Britain used to control the territories were economics.
Mm-hmm.
So that you put a business structure in place. They didn't call it business, but it was driving the economic development of the country. That's what they did in Hong Kong. That's what they did in India. But it was authoritarian rule.
Right.
So they could legislate what the structure was. But when you look at the map back in the colonial period, Britain also had a fleet of ships. And so trade was the issue.
Right. So because they needed the ships to even do anything.
They needed the ships to do the trade. And there was an international trading structure. What surprised me about Britain is that they didn't take control more of Europe.
Right. I mean, if they had all the ships, they had access to all the trade in the Mediterranean too. So.
And they had the political control because their trade supported all of Europe.
Right. Exactly.
Yes.
It's the most powerful power there for the longest.
But it was not a typical, I'll send my armies all over the world, because they didn't have that many armies.
Right.
So they sent in a conquering force, set up a business structure to operate.
And then that's what kind of allowed them to become powerful, I guess.
Yes, and you develop an export process. You put people to work in the fields or whatever product they were developing, and trade it around the world. As,
Was it the British who had South Africa too? Is that where all that?
Well,
was that
Britain and
France or the Dutch?
The Dutch, British and the Dutch. Krugers and the British, and they fought, but they ended up raping South Africa because there were so many resources.
Well, all of Africa.
Yeah, and Zimbabwe, but I worked in South Africa for a couple of years.
How was that? I've wanted to go with Dad for a while, because I'm just curious about it, and I just want to go with me and Dad. I don't want to. I mean, my mom and Michaela and Gwen are all like worried about going to that part of the world in general. I don't know why. Just abstractly for anywhere in a giant continent. I don't know why, but I can understand, being uncomfortable in general. But I kept thinking it was kind of ludicrous. It was like I kept thinking, okay, well maybe like I could just do something crazy and go on a weekend, but the time difference of there, it makes it literally impossible to do that.
Well, I mean, that's another place ought to be on your list.
It is.
South Africa.
Yeah, it is. It is for sure.
Remarkable country. Absolutely remarkable.
Yeah? What was remarkable? Just beautiful country?
Well, just where it's located, you got the Indian Ocean.
Right.
You got the spot where the two oceans come together.
Crazy water out there.
Yes, and there's more at the ship graveyard.
Yep.
But you keep in mind that Africa was controlled by the very wealthy. So Sandton and the resorts in that town are just gorgeous. And then you got your reserves for animals, and the people are special.
What do you mean by that?
Well, you have the contrast in what they did when they conquered South Africa. They put all the different people. You had your Xhosa, and they were in one place. Then you had your Browns, and they were in one place. You had your Dutch,
and they were in one place. And
suddenly you go to Johannesburg, and then you begin to get the mixture.
Right.
But they retain their culture. So there's
like a whole. It's like
Yeah.
Little Vietnam, like down the corner, everywhere.
Yes.
in South-
Yeah. So it's
South
just
Africa.
just a different place, and the language, of course.
Did you hear about that Ugandan in the Olympics? Did you hear about that?
No.
There's a Ugandan runner who, he was a weightlifter who, he was trying to qualify for the Olympics in Japan. So he flew out to Japan to go qualify, and he didn't make the cut. So he needed to fly home to Uganda in order to just to come home, and he had a meltdown while he was there and fled. He disappeared into the country.
No, I didn't hear about that.
Yeah, he disappeared, and
Well, it's going pretty hard for him to hide.
yeah, I was just gonna say the only the black dude running around in Africa. Yeah, and he's an African guy too. I mean, he's gonna stick out like a sore
But
thumb.
did you see the opening of the Olympics?
I didn't see it. I heard it was good though.
Oh, it's fabulous.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, you say that the lead, the guy who carried the flag for Japan
Yeah.
was a big black guy.
Really.
Japan is because of the war.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of black soldiers were over there,
Oh, from the Pacific.
but and they made babies in Japan.
Interesting.
Yes, and so you see a lot of black people in Japan, not mixed.
Yeah. Not. Yeah.
And Osaka,
Right. Of course.
she's mixed.
Right.
Yeah, and so a lot of that went on in Japan.
I've heard Osaka is a very good place for foreigners. I've heard that's a place that's more.
No, I'm talking about tennis player
Oh, okay.
Naomi Osaka.
Naomi Osaka.
Her father is black, her mother's Japanese.
Oh, I think I've seen her. I didn't think I.
Well, she was the flag. She lit the flame.
Oh, okay.
She was the lead bearer.
I'll have to go watch it because I heard it was good.
Oh, you got to watch it.
Yeah.
You got to watch it. It's probably the best one yet.
Mm.
And but you look at countries like Finland,
Mm-hmm.
and suddenly you see black faces in the Finland.
Right.
Yeah. So integration is kind of happening around the
It's
world.
it's everywhere. I mean,
Yeah.
in Britain, there's lots of black
Oh,
people in the
Britain.
UK. Everywhere.
Britain has more people of color than it does the
I think so.
native population.
I mean, honestly, when I think of people from the UK that I'm aware of, like even in just like the fighting game community, most of them are black.
Yeah.
You know, most of them are people who transplanted there, and there's.
Well,
I mean,
what happened with Britain, of course, Britain had so many colonial operations around the world.
mhm.
So if you were part of their colonial network, you had an open invitation
Right.
to come and live in England.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why England is so colorful in that sense.
I think I remember reading that a lot of people came from North Africa too, specifically, that ended up in the UK. I don't know what.
I know a lot of you find a lot of Indians,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of Ugandans, a lot of South Africans
Mm.
because of the territory they control.
Right, because there's from that same network.
But the thing that happened in England, and they've never been able to get beyond it, is you have South Africans living in their community,
Mm-hmm.
the Indians are living in their community. Very little integration in that sense, except when you go downtown, of course,
Where there's everybody.
where there's business.
It seems like that. Is that maybe something that is just global, though? Anyways, right? Like, is that something that just?
Well, it happens here,
Mm-hmm.
except now that because of economics, as soon as folks are able to become doctors and lawyers, they move.
Yeah.
So they go into the Heathrows and
Yeah.
your neighborhood.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Lake
As you
Mary.
look- if you
yeah, all
look
the
around
lakes.
now,
Yeah.
Lake Mary is an integrated capital of the world.
Yeah. There's a ton of people there. Yeah.
All people from all over.
That is how it is historically, I guess. But I mean, we have
Yeah.
historic neighborhoods like Eatonville over here. So.
Yeah. But even Eatonville now, with gentrification that's going on over there,
Mhm.
the value of the property, real estate developers are now trying to get it because it's less costly than buying
In
compressed-
Maitland or somewhere else.
or
Yeah.
in Lake Mary. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I mean, good God, it's not even just Edenville, it's everywhere in
Yeah.
Florida. It doesn't matter if it's a historic black town or if it's just a bunch of country bumpkins living in the middle of nowhere.
They're having huge problems in Miami
Yep.
since the building collapsed.
Oh, yeah, it's crazy.
The contingent neighborhoods are black neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm.
So now what is happening, the developers are trying to buy and control those neighborhoods because what they're going to do is just move Miami Boulevard 2 blocks into those neighborhoods,
Right. And just
rebuild
expand.
and rebuild the condos there.
Right.
And so the folks that live in those communities suddenly got to find a place to live.
It's crazy, man. It's totally crazy. I remember, so like, obviously I finished school in St. Petersburg, right? St. Peter's here. And I remember we did a class about, I must remember it really well because I can't remember the name of the class. But we did a class where we were studying how the history of how the city was developed. And I remember seeing that there was some kind of ordinance or something from 50, 60 years ago in St. Petersburg, which was like, black people cannot live past these train tracks here. And that was a law in the city. And I mean, obviously that's horrible. And it was confusing to me when I came to the city because where the campus was and where the downtown was very different from if you go down to like Martin Luther King Boulevard, which goes south into Sarasota, which that's all, black area. And one of my closest friends, Najee, is from that area. So we're both, I mean, I've spent several years in St. Pete. He grew up in St. Pete. But we saw, 2 different sides. We lived in 2 different sides of St. Pete. I say I'm from St. Pete. He says, I'm from the Burg.
Well, same thing in Orlando.
Yeah.
It happened, it's off the books now, but you go down to Church Street,
Yeah.
you couldn't cross John Young Parkway.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, because that's all black now. And then you go up to Eatonville. No, not Eatonville. What's that area?
Where? Geographically? Pine Hills?
Pine Hills.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was all restricted and reserved for black folk.